Have you ever wondered how to make your applications look stunning with minimal effort? If so, you've clicked on the right video. Today, we're diving into Tailwind CSS, a revolutionary tool that's changing the styling game. But why should you stick around until the end? Well, by the end of this video, you'll not only have mastered the foundations of Tailwind CSS, but also created a stunning website ready to improve your portfolio and chances of landing a job. Now, many additional secrets and tips and tricks will also be scattered throughout the video so you can truly take your web development skills to the next level. This is not your typical crash course. We're going to do it JavaScript mastery style. The first part will teach you how to make the most out of Tailwind CSS, how to fully understand how it works behind the scenes, all of the best practices, different themes, as well as how Tailwind is going to allow you to achieve tasks that usually require JavaScript code, and so much more. But then, in the second part, we'll put all of your newly gained Tailwind skills to the test by building a beautiful Nike landing page. You'll create a uniquely designed website with a navigation bar, complex hero section, popular products, about us, special offers, testimonials, newsletters, and a big footer. And of course, the entire website is completely mobile responsive, all with the power of Tailwind. After you develop this app, I'll even teach you how to get your own domain name and deploy it to the internet so you can share it with your friends, potential employers, and put it on your portfolio. Now, that's a lot to take in. And for that reason, along this video, I've created a complimentary Tailwind CSS starter kit that includes 3 things. Number 1, a quick reference guide. Number 2, a list of all the best Tailwind CSS component libraries. And number 3, a complete ebook that guides you through Tailwind CSS from basic understanding to advanced techniques. It's filled with examples, tips, and best practices, acting as a companion guide to this video. Just click the link in the description below, and the Tailwind CSS starter kit will be on its way to your inbox. Now, without any further ado, Tailwind CSS is a recent sensation and a highly popular utility-first CSS framework that aims to simplify the process of creating modern and responsive web interfaces. Now, unlike Bootstrap, HandDesign, or MUI, which come with pre-designed components and styles, Tailwind offers a set of CSS utility classes that increase the speed of development, eliminating the need for writing custom CSS from scratch. Tailwind has created a completely new paradigm for writing CSS, or as the creator of Tailwind itself would put it,
if every instinct you have is wrong, then the opposite would have to be right.
While UI kits are fantastic for ready-to-use generic components, they can be frustrating when you need to customize their styles to match your design. Everyone can spot it from a mile away. It's like the McDonald's of web design. But with Tailwind, you get the freedom to create your own flavor. It doesn't impose any predefined styles on you, giving you complete control over the customization, making it easy to create unique designs. And as of recently, Tailwind-specific component libraries like Tailwind UI, Headless UI, and ShadCN have started spawning. They let you whip up UIs lightning fast while still allowing for complete customizability. But hey, what about the industry? Do companies or professional developers actually use Tailwind? The answer is yes. From the world's leading AI organization, OpenAI, to Shopify, Loom, The Verge, Turbo, GitHub, Microsoft, and even NASA, Tailwind CSS is the go-to choice for many top-tier organizations. And the official examples showcase features a list of these renowned companies and projects that proudly utilize Tailwind CSS in their projects. If Tailwind hasn't hooked you up already, I hope I got you hooked now. I hope you're excited, so let's dive right in. How does Tailwind work? Well, please allow me to provide you with a high-level overview of how Tailwind works behind the scenes. To explain that, I want you to think of how do we write pure CSS. We create some elements and attach some classes to them. Div with a class container, and then within it, an h1 with a class of container heading. And then we write the corresponding CSS, container and container heading. These are, of course, CSS classes. Now, let's turn it up a bit. Let's create a class for flex, item center, justify center, text blue, and text small, and let's modify the HTML to use all of these classes. Did you get that? We're still using classes, but this is starting to look more and more like Tailwind. In the second scenario, we've made more classes, which are also known as utilities. Tailwind CSS is all about these utility classes. Every utility is just a CSS class using a specific CSS style. For example, when we use a utility like flex, Tailwind CSS automatically generates a corresponding CSS class with that name. Isn't that incredible? We just have to write these utility classes specified by Tailwind for all CSS properties, and that's it. No need to stress over how to write better CSS class names or use the BEM method. Just do what you want to do. Okay, we get it. You're sold. That's why you're watching this video. Now, let's dive right into the crash course, and then later on, you'll even build a project to become a real master of Tailwind. Before we start building out our project, let's first get the hosting and the domain name for our new website, your portfolio, or any site you'll create in the future. Hostinger is my personal recommendation, and right now, they're offering a crazy deal, so I simply needed to show this to you. The link to the website you're seeing right now on the screen with an extra discount in it is in the description. Let's visit it and click the Claim Deal button to see if it's really as good as it sounds. We are getting premium web hosting. For about $3 a month, you can host 100 websites. You also receive 100 gigabytes of SSD storage, unlimited free SSL certificate, which means that you get HTTPS security, and most importantly, you get a free email, but on top of that, you get a free domain name. Hostinger has a great price to quality ratio, high-speed servers, 24/7 chat support, and most importantly, developers love using it, as you can see by these exceptional ratings on third-party platforms. We're going to create a Nike landing page. So we want to have a custom domain name to be credible. For every industry standard application, such as the one you're building in this video, we need it to be fast, reliable, and trustworthy. And all of the features you're getting with this plan, such as a custom domain name, email, and speed, makes all the difference. Since I partnered with Hostinger, they decided to give you an even bigger discount. You can find the link and a unique discount code in the description. Once you visit the link in the description, click Claim Deal, and then Add to Cart. Here, we can choose the period of our hosting. In this case, I'm going to choose 48 months, since that's going to allow me to save the most money and get free 3 months. After that, you can scroll down and select your payment method, but more importantly, you can add a special JavaScript Mastery coupon code that's going to allow you to get an even bigger discount. After you complete the purchase, you'll be redirected to the Hostinger's dashboard. I'll see you there. Immediately after you purchase, you'll be redirected to the guided setup. We'll look into it later. For now, just click the Hostinger logo at the top. And as you can see, I'm personally using Hostinger for all of JavaScript Mastery websites and emails. If you purchase premium hosting, then you should be able to see this yellow setup button here and also claim a free domain at the top. Let's immediately set up our hosting so that after we can focus only on development. Within our guided setup, you can click Start Now, skip Create an Empty Website. At this point, you should be able to see a Claim a Free Domain button that's going to bring up a new form allowing you to immediately choose a new domain. But I couldn't wait to get started developing it, so I already chose mine. It's tailwindcsspro.com. You can choose something else or wait until the end of the video to figure out which domain you want to use. Select your new domain, register it, and click Finish Setup. This process is going to take about a minute, and it's done. Click Manage Site to visit the control panel. Here, you can see that our domain is connected, And all that's left for us to do is to go first of all through the crash course part of this video to learn how to use the most out of Tailwind and then build this phenomenal app that we're then going to deploy to the internet at the end of this video using the file manager. With that said, let's dive right in. Let's visit play.tailwindcss.com. You'll see some code here. Delete everything. We'll use this site to learn how Tailwind works behind the scenes. Let's write the famous hello world by creating a simple h1 file, and then within it, we can say hello world. Of course, we won't stay here for the entire duration of the project. I just want to teach you how Tailwind truly works. So here, you can see that we have hello world, and on the right side, you can see the representation. Now, to add a text color, we can use a provided default theme color that Tailwind CSS provides. To get to these colors, simply add a new class, equal to, and say text dash, and you'll immediately see all of the different utility classes, from classes modifying the overflow to classes modifying the size and also the color. In this case, let's add a text dash center, which is going to immediately center the hello world. Let's also say text-lg to make it larger. And here you can see it applies a specific CSS style. And then let's do text-blue-400. And immediately it's going to change the color as well. This is pretty cool, right? Well, let me show you how it works behind the scenes. At the bottom, there is a tab that says Generated CSS. Click on it. You'll see different subtabs, such as all, base, components, and utilities. The all and the base contain some general styles, like applying a zero margin to the body, as by default there is some margin, some tag specifics, and so much more. Now, click on the Utilities tab, and if we expand this, does this seem similar to what we just wrote? Text-align center, text-lg, and then text-blue. This is the on-the-fly generated CSS. Whatever classes we add to the top, the generated CSS will appear here. Let's try to change the color to text-green-400, and immediately you can see how it changed. The generated code changes the moment you change something. It even shows you the size of the generated code, in this case 1.17 kilobytes. This is exactly how Tailwind works. Now, let's see how we can use some other CSS properties, such as background color, spacing, margin, paddings, and more. For example, we can go a bit down and create a div. And this div, of course, we have to close it, is going to contain a p tag. And this p tag is going to say a div. And we can give it a class that's going to be equal to text-center, font-mono, which is going to change the font family, as well as font-extra bold. So we changed a lot of different properties immediately. And now we can also modify the div by giving it a class equal to w-full for full width, h-10 to give it a bit of height, bg-violet-200 to give it a background color, border-violet-600, rounded-md, as well as margin y of 4, and p of 2, which stands for padding. So you can see how quickly are we changing things. And the structure is straightforward. It's derived from CSS properties. As you can see, all of the additional styles have been added, and you can see there's a pretty hefty number of CSS properties right here. And it was so easy to write them right here within our HTML or later on JSX code. Now, let's explain what does this mean. W stands for width, and then we can add additional properties to it, like maybe 2, which is going to be 0.5 rem, 20, or so on. We can change it. In this case, let's leave it to full. Height is a specific number. Then we have the BG violet, which is built into Tailwind, and then 200, which is one variation of that color. Same for the border. Rounded MD is going to apply a border radius to this div. Margin Y is going to bring a margin to top and bottom, and padding is going to just give it padding. And yeah, all this time while we're adding these classes, I hope that you looked into this at least once. A lot of styles have been added, and this is not something you have to care about in development. This is just to understand how it works. We can completely remove this generated CSS because with Tailwind, you just write everything right here. You might think that Tailwind is making us a bit limited. We have some predefined widths, predefined heights, predefined colors even, and maybe predefined paddings and margins. This is not good. But that's not really the case. We are not restricted to using only the predefined utilities offered by Tailwind CSS. This is where Tailwind becomes much more flexible with its just-in-time compiler. With Tailwind CSS version 2.1 and beyond, the new JIT compiler allows us to generate styles on the fly. For instance, if we need a custom or an arbitrary style like a font size of 13 pixels, which is not a part of the predefined utilities in Tailwind, we can use the just-in-time compiler and special syntax to create a new CSS class on demand. Let me show you how it works. For example, on this p tag, we can say text dash, and now usually you would do something like LG, which is going to apply a font size of 1.125 rem, which is going to look like this. But let's say you want to make it, for example, 50 pixels. If you want to do that, you just open a pair of square brackets and in there specify a value. And immediately the exact value is going to be applied. It's going to be font size 50 pixels. And in the generated CSS, if you go all the way to the bottom, you should be able to see text 50. There we go. Works like a charm. And remember, this way, Tailwind doesn't have to have millions of variations of all of different properties. It only generates the styles that you actually use. This ensures that the CSS bundle remains lean and contains only the styles that are necessary for your project, resulting in a more efficient and optimized web application. The just-in-time compiler speeds up the build process, supports custom styles, and keeps the CSS consistent in both development and production, as well as improves how websites perform in browsers. And the best part is, it's completely built into Tailwind. You don't have to do anything else. You just have to start using it. Now, let's talk a bit about one of the most important aspects of styling our websites, which is layout and flexbox. How are we actually laying out elements on the screen? Before we do that, let's wrap everything in a main tag, so we have a clear starting point to our application. There we go. Everything is wrapped. We can indent it properly. And we can also make this look better by removing the text 50, as well as giving this a border of 2, which is going to just make it look a bit nicer. And then giving the main a class of P-5, which stands for padding. There we go. And now throughout this entire crash course, we'll keep adding new elements below within this nice window, and we'll be able to explore Tailwind in action. So now let's discuss layout. When we're talking about layout, what we're really talking about is the arrangement and positioning of elements on the website. Tailwind provides different utilities to support different CSS properties like aspect ratio, box sizing, float, position, overflow, z-index, and more. But most of the times, you'll just see yourself using display, position, and sometimes overflow. Now, let's create a few more tags to see how we can manage these properties using Tailwind. First, let's talk about position. Position determines how an HTML element is positioned within its containing element or the overall website. There are different values, starting from relative, which shifts a bit from its normal spot, but everything else behaves as it's still there. Absolute, which makes the elements move independently, like a puzzle piece based on a nearby parent or the whole page. Fixed, which makes the element stay locked in place even when you scroll up and down. And sticky, when the element acts normal, but when you scroll to a certain point, it sticks around like a post-it note. Now, why am I explaining this, as this is just basic CSS? Well, Tailwind uses the same names for their classes to keep things simple. So if we create a div that's going to look like this, and it's going to have a class equal to fixed, that means that this div is going to be fixed. This is it. So for example, to be able to see this div move around, let's give it a W of 10, which is going to be a width of 2.5 rem. Let's give it a height of 10 as well, a BG-red-500, and top-0. So there we go. As soon as we put fixed in top 0, you saw how it moved from here, where it should originally be, to the top of the screen. Originally, it was supposed to go after the ADiv element. But with fixed at the top, it goes to the top. And for the purposes of this video, we can keep it there. Now, let's talk a bit about display. Display determines how the element behaves in terms of layout and visibility within the document, which essentially means that it controls how the elements are displayed. Now, there are various forms of display, from block, inline, inline block, none, flex, and grid. And similar to position, we can use these values directly as utilities in Tailwind. So for example, the famous flex would look like this. We can create a parent div and give that parent div a class equal to flex. Within it, we can have an additional div that's going to have a class equal to h-16, w-16, rounded-full to make it into a circle, and bg-blue-500. There we go. And now you can dictate how the children elements behave by passing additional classes to its parents, such as justify end. It's going to move it to the end. Or maybe justify center. It's going to move it to the center. And you can also give it a space -x-6. So this is going to space the elements nicely if you add more. Let me show you how that works. So for example, we can now duplicate this div and you have 2. And this spacing, if you modify it, it's going to change how the elements appear within it. Pretty cool stuff, right? We can also do justify between to make all of these elements spread out evenly, in which case we do not need the space. Flex is definitely one of the needed skills to master CSS and responsive design creation. The moment you master flex, you can flex on anything. So as a recommendation, I would suggest trying out this website, Flexbox Froggy, where you can solidify your learning of Flexbox. It's a fun interactive game to learn how to use different Flexbox properties. In this game, you have to help the froggy get to the lily pad, and you can do that by using flex properties. So we can say justify content is equal to, and that's going to be flex end. At least I hope. And there we go. The froggy moved, and you can go to the next one. So this is pretty cool if you're a beginner with flex. Now, on the other hand, if you're a fan of using CSS grid, you could do something like this. Let's create a new div with a class name equal to grid. And let's say grid-calls-5 as well as gap-2. We can then close this div, and within it, we can create a new div that's going to have a class equal to bg-violet-500 and h-12, which is going to create a rectangle. And now we can essentially close it right here and duplicate it 5 times, which is going to create 5 rectangles. Now, what does grid-calls-5 stand for? Which corresponding CSS value is it? Well, you can either refer to the Tailwind documentation, or you can simply hover over it and see that it means grid template columns, repeat 5, min-max 0, 1 fr. It's a pretty complex CSS property, but essentially it aligns all elements in a row with equal width. If you change the number to 3, then you'll be able to see 3 per row. And there you go, the grid magic. We can also add a quick empty 3 that's going to provide a margin on top to divide it from the bottom. And we can also make this 3 and remove the 2. So we're playing around, but as you can see, everything that you can do in CSS, you can do with Tailwind. You can play with all the different elements, positioning, layout, and more, and in a way that's even simpler than using regular CSS is. Of course, behind the scenes, you're still using regular CSS, but it just feels so natural writing it right here. I gotta pause right here for a moment and let you know that first time ever that I saw the Tailwind code, I didn't like it at all. I was like, why do we have all of these classes, almost like inline styles within the elements? I hated it. But then I never ever visited another CSS file again because you can write the majority of the styles right here. And I started loving it. It makes your development efficiency so much higher because you don't have to constantly switch between HTML, CSS, and then have multiple CSS styles for different elements. You do all the styling directly on the elements they correspond to. Great. That was it when it came to layout and Flexbox. Next, let's focus on media queries. Using media queries for responsiveness is easy. Tailwind provides a list of breakpoints inspired by common device resolutions. You can see them right within Tailwind docs. They have the max SM, minimum width 640, 768, 1024, 1280, and 1536. You don't need any more breakpoints. 5 is enough. But in case you do want more, you can easily customize it. It's good to know that Tailwind uses min-width media query as default. Min-width means that it sets styles for a specific screen width, in this case 640, or larger. Okay, so this one is going to be activated for 640 and above. This one, 768 and above, and so on. And you can use each and every utility class within these media queries. Let me show you a simple example. So we can create a div, and this div is going to have a p tag within it saying I will appear for device resolution greater than 768 pixels. So we can give it a class equal to MD, meaning medium devices, block, and usually hidden. And therefore, immediately it hides. But now if we duplicate this and change the MD to max MD, this is going to apply a maximum media query, which means that it's going to set styles for a specific screen width or smaller. In this case, we're smaller, so you can see it here. So we can simply say, I will appear for devices smaller than 768. And now we can move between those, and you can see that it nicely changes. At least I hope that you can see this little thing right here that changes once we move it. Pretty cool stuff. So you can manipulate all the different media queries right within your Tailwind styles. Now, also, if you're familiar with CSS, you may know how things like hover, active, and element, and such pseudo classes are not good for developer experience. All of that code makes for a tricky syntax. But thanks to Tailwind, we can make it look simpler and easier to use. Let me show you what I mean. We can create a button and close it right here. That button is simply going to say, as buttons usually do, click me. And let's start styling it by giving it a class equal to margin Y of 2. That's going to give it a margin on top and bottom. Rounded-LG, change the background to BG Blue 500. You can already start seeing it. Padding X of 4, meaning padding on the horizontal axis, or that's going to be left and right. Padding Y on top and bottom of 2. Text-white. And now this is a pretty cool button, but we don't have any hover or click effects. How can we make that happen? Well, with Tailwind, in a simple way. You simply say hover and then a colon. And then you can define any kind of style that you want it happens when you hover. In this case, BG-Blue-700. So now, if you hover, it immediately applies it. Let's add a couple more. Let's add a focus outline-none. This is going to remove the ugly outline that you usually have when a button is focused. But on the focus, we can do something like ring, which is going to give it a specific shadow. We can also, on focus, change the ring-blue-300, and on active, we can set the BG to blue 800. So we provided a lot of different modifications on this button in such a simple way. Now, check this out. Let's also create a UL, an unordered list, right below the button. That's going to look something like this. Within it, we can have an ALI element that's going to say item 1, and it's going to have a class equal to bg-white, p2 for padding, and then we can use another one of these special properties called first and give it a bg yellow 100. So if it's a first element, it's going to have that bg yellow. Now, if we duplicate that below, you're going to notice that the second one does not have that background because it's not first in the list. And of course, this p2 was supposed to be p-2 for the padding to actually work. Now, the second li can also have an additional property, something like odd. So if it's an odd element, we can give it a bg blue 200. And if it's even, we can give it bg green 200. This one becomes green. But now if we duplicate 3 more elements below, change their numbers to items 2, 3, 4, and 5, you can immediately see how we change the styles of those items. Only the first one gets bg yellow because it is the first element. The odd ones get bg blue. The even ones get bg green. And we can also provide now a style or class to the container by giving it a my2 for margin and space-y-2 to provide some spacing. It's so easy to use these otherwise complicated CSS properties. How good is that? Next, let's talk dark mode. Designing modern user interfaces usually means designing them in a light and dark theme. And just like everything else, setting up and styling for dark and light themes is easier than ever. Before we start, if we want to create our own toggle, we need to make a small change. We have to modify the configuration to include the dark class. So let's go to the config section, and this is just an additional file which you're going to have within your Visual Studio Code. And here, above theme, we can say dark mode is going to be set to class. This means that based on a simple class, we'll be able to change the theme. Now let's go back to the HTML. And if we don't specify that class, the theme styles will automatically adapt based on the user's operating system. That's quite interesting. We only want to mention this field, class right here, in case you want to offer a theme toggle on the website. It's a choice that you make. Now let me show you how to use these dark theme styles. Here's an example. Whatever utilities you add, just provide dark colon before them, and you're all set. These utilities will only take effect when the theme is set to dark. Otherwise, they won't have any impact. Let's create a simple div. And within it, we can have an h3 that's going to say something like, this is a text element. And we can close it. And below it, we can have a p tag that's going to say, this is an even longer p tag element. There we go. Now, below these elements, still within the div, I want to create a button that this time, this button is actually going to do something. And it's going to toggle the dark mode. So let's give it an ID that's going to be equal to toggle dark. Let's give it a class, something like text-blue-900, padding x of 4 for padding, padding y of 2, text-small, font-medium, margin top 8 to divide it from other elements, bg blue 100, and rounded-empty. There we have our button. Now don't click it just yet because it's not doing anything. So what we can do is we can give it an onClick function that's going to say document.body.classList.toggle. And we can toggle the dark mode, which is going to look like this. Of course, we have to close it with single spaces because we have others outside. And now before you click this button, let's actually style this div as well as the h3 and the p tag. Let's give this div a class equal to m-10 for margin. Let's give it a rounded-lg, a bg of white, a padding x of 6 for padding, a padding y of 8, shadow-xl, ring-1, ring is what outlines the actual div. We can change the color of the ring to ring-slate-900 over 5, which is a specific color, and that creates this nice element. Let's also style our h3 to give it a class name by giving it a class equal to text-base, font-medium, tracking-tight, text-slate-900, and there we go. It's looking much better. And let's also style the p tag by giving it a class equal to empty-2, text-small, text-slate-500, and there we go. It's a typical looking overlay. Now, if we click this, nothing's gonna happen. Now, in case you wanna make this button work, down in the description, you'll find a script, and you can simply copy that script and paste it below the main. This is a script that's going to allow us to test the functionality of changing the mode. Usually in React, you would do this with a state or local storage. Once you add it, you can click the button, but nothing's gonna happen, and that's because we haven't yet provided the dark mode classes. So now, if you say dark, and then specify what you wanna do. For example, you can say bg-black. And now, if you click a button, it's going to be applied. But of course, we have to apply it to the elements within it as well. So on the h3, you can say dark, and then change the text to white. And on dark on this one, you can change the text to blue 100, which is a light variation of that. And now, if you click it and toggle it, as you can see, it changes the mode. Pretty cool stuff, right? And it's not that hard to change the styles of a specific property when in dark mode. Now, in this example, we're also using a few utilities that we haven't discussed earlier. The shadow XL, as well as ring1. Rather than me explaining its CSS meanings, why don't you check out the Utilities tab and see the CSS code it generates? You can do that by simply hovering over it, or by going to the generated CSS, and then searching for shadow XL. You can see that it applies this huge list of styles of different shadows that it applies. So a simple 2 words right here apply this many CSS styles. And you can see it truly does make a big difference in styling this element by elevating it from the ground. So you can see that Tailwind becomes much more powerful when you know these additional styles. And later in the crash course, I'm gonna let you know how you'll be able to know all of these styles without having to remember them. Now, before, I briefly mentioned that you don't have to simply use predefined styles. We can also use custom styles. So let's dive a bit deeper into that. There are 2 options for incorporating custom styles into Tailwind. Let's say you wish to introduce a new color that isn't present in the default Tailwind theme. Here's how we can achieve that with 2 different methods. Let's create a new p tag right here below the button. That p tag is simply going to say chestnut color. There we go. So it's going to be a specific one. And we can wrap that p tag right here. Now, right here, we can see it, and we can give it a class name, or rather just a class because we're not in React. And we can make it text-2XL so we can see it better right here at the bottom. Now, you can give it any kind of special custom variables within square brackets, as we discussed in the intro. So that's going to be text-square brackets hash 973F29, or whatever other hexadecimal value you want, and it's going to immediately change. And then you can also provide some BG, in this case, BG-stone, which is a defined variable, 100. But you can also do something like BG- and then enter any kind of hexadecimal value like so. Pretty cool stuff. And we can also give it a P-2. There we go. Now, it's not just colors. You can use it for any utility classes. For example, let's say you want to have custom padding. You don't have to say P-2, you can say P- and then in square brackets, 16 pixels. And this is going to immediately just increase the padding. You can do that for text size as well. It doesn't have to be text2-XL. It can be text- and then 12 pixels. There we go, much smaller. So whenever you want to do something arbitrary, you just put it in square brackets. However, you will observe that this approach is suitable for accomplishing small tasks rapidly. Nevertheless, as you advance in development of the application, the complexity of managing all the code increases. Consider using the same chestnut color in multiple files, and then imagine your boss or manager instructing you to modify it to something else. Imagine the number of files and lines that you would have to locate the code and then modify it in such a scenario. This is the moment where we utilize the second approach, the Tailwind config. Tailwind config is incredibly important, and so far we haven't really dove into it. It allows us to seamlessly control and organize the visual style of the website. The procedure is simple. Get to the config, and then dive into the extend part. Now, what does it mean to extend? Well, that means that you want to extend the predefined colors from Tailwind CSS. The default values are cool, but maybe you want to add your own. So let's add a colors part, and within it, you want to give it a chestnut color. That's going to be a string of 973F29. Now, if you go back to your HTML, you can simply say text-chestnut. Makes so much more sense, works just as it did before, and you can easily use it whenever you want. Now, let's talk about reusability. In the previous example of dark mode, we created long styles directly on the tag, such as on this div, h3, p tag, but specifically the button. And this is okay. It might happen when building big applications. And this is okay. It's most likely going to happen really often when building big applications. But cluttering the view with all of these utility classes wouldn't be considered clean code. For example, check this out. You don't even have to write it, but I created this really custom button with a lot of different hover, click effects, and so much more. And it takes about 5 lines of code just for the styles. It's too rough. Nobody would like to see such a big chunk of utility classes scattered all across your JSX or HTML. So how can we avoid such cases while still having the flexibility of Tailwind? Well, there are a couple of solutions. First, break your layouts into specific components. Instead of writing everything in a single page, create separate components like buttons, inputs, and more. The second solution is to use directives. Do you remember the base, components, and utilities tabs? Now open up the CSS tab inside of Tailwind, and you'll see something like this: Tailwind base, components, and utilities. Why is this, and why do you think we need it? Well, over here, base, components, and utilities are parts of the approach to structuring and organizing styles using the configuration method. Base styles are styles applied globally across your project. Components are styles applied to the components or reusable UI elements. And utilities are atomic styles for individual properties like margins, paddings, and typography. The add Tailwind directive right here inserts Tailwind styles into CSS. Similarly, we have another directive, which is the add layer. Let me show you how you can use it to move the classes from this huge div right here, where we applied multiple class, to just one single word. So first, you have to copy all of these classes right here and rename them for something like .card or just card. Then in the CSS, you apply a layer, components, and say .card. And then you use the apply directive and simply paste all of those styles. Now you can see the card is back here. It works as it did before. But now in HTML, you can see that this class or this div contains just a single word, which makes it much cleaner to read. Works like a charm. Of course, you wouldn't do this for all of the classes because this stuff is pretty readable right here, right? It fits in one line and it only has descriptive files that you need to know what this element is all about. But when you get a really complicated list of classes, such as this one, you can simply grab it, call it a special button, and then simply move to the layers and apply a new class, such as special button and use the apply directive. And there we go. The button is back here. I hope that makes sense. So you don't use it for everything, but just for the larger class names. And the third option is to use component libraries like ShadCN, Tailwind UI, or Headless UI for creating commonly used components like buttons, inputs, and more. They're going to provide you with a component that's already going to have all of the base styles applied, but you'll be able to choose which additional ones you want to style it with. So, what's the takeaway? Where there's always a way. You just have to figure out what works for you. For me specifically, I like a combination of all of these ways. I like to use component libraries, and you can find the links to all of my favorite ones in the Tailwind guide linked below. I like to use those for basic components such as buttons, text elements, and more. And then when you have a longer class that you want to write, you simply move it as an apply directive. Now, what do we want to cover next? Well, let's talk about some common misconceptions around Tailwind. There's a lot of different myths about all the different technologies that are out there, which makes it easy to assume that there are misconceptions around Tailwind CSS as well. A common one is that we're writing inline styles. Writing everything and applying it to a tag. Is it inline? Well, no, that's not the case. If you've understood everything we discussed so far, you would know that that's not inline. It's just about using more CSS classes. That's it. Inline classes are limited to directly styling an element, like this, where you have style and then say padding 10, color blue. You can't use more advanced properties like pseudo classes in an inline style, and they don't have access to media queries as well. On the other hand, you can do all of these things with Tailwind CSS utilities. The utility class is about creating a small set of reusable CSS classes. You can't reuse inline styles. You have to rewrite them whenever needed. So no, writing Tailwind is not equal to writing inline styles. And on top of the misconceptions, I want to give you one final tip before we get started with building our great UI UX Nike landing website. People often ask me, how on earth do you remember all those Tailwind classes? And the answer is, I can't even recall what I wrote 2 minutes ago. Let me tell you a little secret. You don't have to memorize every single class. As you keep working with Tailwind, you have to develop muscle memory. It's like riding a bike or trying to tie your shoes. You'll naturally know which classes to use for different elements. Just keep practicing, and before you know it, Tailwind's classes will become second nature to you. You might wonder how you'll manage to write all of these classes while learning without watching any tutorials. But fear not. One tip to kickstart your Tailwind journey, besides using our Tailwind guide, is to always keep the docs nearby and use the control or command plus the letter key combo. Whenever you need to find a CSS property, such as border radius or color, just type those magical keys and type it in. And immediately you can see all of the properties. Tailwind is incredibly intuitive, and just in few days, you'll be crafting UIs like a pro without constantly peeking at docs. It's all about practice and embracing your creative flow. Moreover, there are a lot of Visual Studio Code extensions that can significantly speed up your process of writing Tailwind classes. And that's it for the first part of our crash course. But in the JavaScript mastery style, let's dive deep into the build and deploy part, where you'll develop a beautiful Nike landing page using your new Tailwind skills. With that said, to get started with our practical build and deploy part of this tutorial, we're going to do what we always do on the JavaScript Mastery YouTube channel, and that is start from bare beginnings by creating a new empty folder on our desktop. Let's call it Nike, and we can simply drag and drop that empty folder into an empty Visual Studio Code window. Once it's there, you can go to View and then Terminal. This is going to open up a built-in integrated Visual Studio Code terminal through which we'll be able to set up our application. And to set it up, you can go to tailwindcss.com and click Get Started. The first step is, of course, installation. But you can go to Quick Start and go to Vite. Install Tailwind CSS with Vite. It is a new alternative to Create React app, which is going to allow us to spin up our applications much more quickly. And there you can simply follow all of the steps to create our Tailwind Vite React application. First, let's run npm create vite add latest, and then we can do template React. But instead of simply pasting everything, I'm going to simply, instead of my project, say /, which is going to create it in the current repository, and press enter. There we go. This is it. Now you don't have to cd into another folder because everything got installed right here. The second step is to install dev dependencies such as Tailwind CSS, Post CSS, and Auto Prefixer. So let's go ahead and copy this and paste it right here. These are the dependencies that are not going to be used in production. And please notice that the entire Tailwind CSS is a dev dependency. That means that it's nowhere to be seen on the deployed version of the application. That's because, as we discussed, all of the Tailwind class names get transpiled to regular CSS. Finally, we can initialize the Tailwind project and paste it right here. This is going to create a new postcss.config.js as well as the tailwind.config.js files. Then you need to configure your template paths. So simply copy this entire tailwind.config.js, go here and paste it. Here, we added some paths, and inside of these files, we're going to write Tailwind CSS code. Finally, we need to add Tailwind directives to make this all work, and we can add that to our index.css by overriding everything that we have there and just simply putting it here. Then we can copy our new app, paste it in the app.jsx instead of everything that we have here, remove the CSS folder because we won't be needing it, and ensure that in the main, we indeed are importing the index.css. So that is it. And here we can see that our CSS is complaining a bit, saying unknown add rule at Tailwind. It should be able to read this considering that we installed Tailwind right here as a dev dependency. But let's try to run our application and then see if it works. For that, we can simply run npm run dev by opening the terminal and pasting it in. This is going to run our application on localhost 5173, and there we go. You can see the hello world, and it is both bolded and underlined, which means that our Tailwind classes are being put in motion, which is all that we need. And there we go. Our project is set up. That was quick and easy. Now you can notice that here we have the assets folder, where we simply have a React SVG. But throughout this Nike landing page, we're going to have many more photos, logos, and more. So you simply want to delete this assets folder. And then in the description down below, you're going to find a zipped updated assets folder, which is going to contain all of the images and icons that we're going to use throughout building this application. So simply download it, unzip it, and then paste it right here. And you can notice all of these great images. Another thing we're going to need is going to be, again, in the description down below, but it's going to be within a GitHub gist file. And it's going to be this index.css, where we simply have tailwind for now. So copy that code and paste it right here. You're going to notice that this is the same thing. We're still using Tailwind, but we imported some fonts, set up some basic styles, and then also used some of the applied functionalities that we explored in the intro. We're doing nothing special here. Everything is going to be explained as we go. Of course, with the CSS file, we must not forget the updated tailwind.config.js. Throughout this video, we're going to go in detail about modifying our Tailwind config. So in the same GitHub gist, simply find the file there, copy, and paste it here. This is actually where you're learning, where we're going to go over adding different colors, font families, box shadows, and extending or expanding on the original Tailwind theme to make it your own. You learned the basics, but now you're ready to move forward and truly make the most out of your Tailwind config. Now, we want to make our app look great from the start. So within our assets and then icon, you can see a favicon.ico. This is that little image that you can see on your Chrome or Safari tab. Simply take it and drag and drop it to your public folder and delete the vite.svg. This is going to ensure that from the start, we're working on a well-branded Nike landing page. Now, we want to ensure that our code is presentable and readable all the time. So there's also the .eslint.rc config that's going to ensure that our code works, but also reads well. Throughout making this video, I made just some small adjustments that's going to make our coding process more enjoyable. So in that same GitHub gist down below, simply copy it and paste it right here. You'll be able to see that the modifications are minimal. Almost everything is exactly as it was. Now we can close these files, and I know that we spent some time just copying a couple of files. But trust me, even the files we copied, we're gonna explore in so much depth later on. But this is just the beginning. We now have a clean, empty slate, and we are ready to start developing our application. So let's put our browser side by side by our editor. There we go. You can see that we have our Vite plus React, as well as a previous version of our deployed application. Of course, the domain name is not right here, but once we actually deploy our application, we're going to deploy it to a great new domain. So with that said, and without any further ado, let's start building this application and putting all of your newly acclaimed Tailwind knowledge to practice. We are of course going to start from the app. And from here, immediately, we want to create all of the different sections that our app is going to use. So let's remove the H1 and let's turn this into a modern arrow function. That's going to be const app is equal to, and we can simply put parentheses instead of curly braces. This is going to allow us to immediately return whatever we want to return, and then we can export default app. We use this method when you don't have any other code, such as console logs or functions within your app. It's just going to be the representation or the JSX. So with that said, we can give our main a class name. Keep in mind, we're now in React, so we have to use class name of relative. So this is going to be relative to its container. And immediately within here, we want to render a component called nav. Of course, for now, we're going to leave this as a text, but later on, we're going to turn this into a real component. Then we're going to have another section. And within that section, we're going to render the hero component. To that hero, we can give a class name. On extra large devices, we want to give it a padding of 1. And usually on wide devices, this is a min width of 1440p. And then we can give it a padding of R and usually a padding of B. Now, you might be wondering, what are these? These are some new BR paddings or margins. What is that? Well, if you search your code for padding B, you'll be able to see that we have defined it in the index.css, and that it's nothing more than a regular class that applies some of the Tailwind classes, such as on small devices, apply a specific padding and usually apply another one. This is just a simpler way to create a new class that we can then reuse in a simpler way. Padding B, this is it, as in bottom. And we have the hero section here. Now below this section, we're going to have another section, which is going to have a class name equal to padding. And again, what is this padding? Well, let's search for it. If I simply search for padding, you can see that we have it within our index.css. Of course, if we search for it, it's going to apply a padding X, meaning horizontal, as well as a padding Y, but we're also immediately making it responsive. And of course, we can later on explore why these values are the right ones to use. But this is just a simple layer utility class that we're using here. And within here, we're going to render the popular products component or section. Now we can duplicate this section a couple of times. 1, 2, 3. The second one is going to render a component called super quality, like so. This is going to be a big product. Then we can render a services tab. And finally, we can also render the special offer tab. All of these are going to have the padding, but the services is going to have padding X and padding Y 10. It's going to be a bit different from other ones. I think you can already see it on the finished side. It just requires a bit less padding on top and bottom than other sections, and it's also visible here because it's more tightly put together. Below our special offer, we're going to have 3 new sections, so we can duplicate it 1, 2, 3 times. we're going to have a customer reviews, we're going to have a subscribe one, and we're going to have a footer. All of these are going to have some different classes. So customer reviews is going to have a background. It's going to be a BG pale blue as well as padding as all the other sections. And the subscribe is going to have a padding X, meaning just on the left and right. It's going to, on small devices, have a PY, meaning padding top and bottom of 32, and usually padding of 16. And W-full, so it takes the full width of the screen. And finally, the footer is going to have BG-black, padding-X, padding-T, as well as PB of 8. So again, we're just working on positioning all of these elements across the screen. Soon enough, it's all going to start making sense. But with that said, we have now created all of the sections of our website, and we are ready to start creating the file and folder structure that we're going to use throughout this entire course. So let's create a new folder within the source folder called sections. And within it, we need to create all of the files for all of the components or sections that we have mentioned here. So that's going to be customer reviews.jsx. And there you can run RAFCE. This is going to create a React arrow function component. So simply it's going to spin it up and give you what you need. In case this didn't work for you, you can go to extensions and search for ES7 Plus React, React Native, Redux snippets. And then you'll be able to simply run this and get the boilerplate code. Once we create it for one, we can just repeat this process for all of the other components. So let's go back here and let's create another section called footer.jsx. Again, you run RAFCE, press enter, and we can remove the import for React. Let's keep repeating the process for other sections. We're going to have a hero.jsx. You can run RAFCE again. Let's do popular products.jsx, RAFCE. We can also do services, RAFCE. We can do a special offer, RAFCE. And let's also do subscribe.jsx, RAFCE. And finally, we're going to have the super quality section. This is going to be an interesting one. And we can simply run RAFCE. Now, we don't need to import React anymore. We're using the newer versions of React, so we can simply delete the import statement at the top, just so we have a bit of a cleaner working space in each file. And now you could import all of these sections manually within our homepage. And let me show you how that would look like. You would go into the app, and then you would say import something like, let's do hero from /sections hero. And then you would need to duplicate this for every other component, such as the nav, also for popular products, and so on. But there's an easier way. You can import all of these sections in one line. Let me show you how. Within the sections folder, create a new index.js file. Within it, we'll need to import every single component manually, such as import hero from /hero. We also need to import popular products from /popular products. We can import something like super quality from /super quality. We can import services from services. We can also import special offer from special offer. Let's also import customer reviews from customer reviews. Let's import subscribe from subscribe. And let's import footer from footer. This might seem like extra work, but as I said, it's going to allow us to have our app.jsx much simpler, which is the primary goal. Now that we have this, we can simply export all of them individually, such as hero, popular products, super quality, services, special offer, customer reviews, subscribe, and footer. And now we can import them right here by simply naming them. So we can import the customer reviews, the footer, the hero, popular products, services, special offers, subscribe, super quality, and so much more. And if you noticed how this was autofilled for me, I'm using an extension called GitHub Copilot. I do believe that it's free for students. Usually it's paid, and they do have a free trial. So I would highly recommend to test it out. And trust me, it's going to highly speed up your developer workflow. Now that we have all of these, you can simply select every single string that we have here by holding the Alt key and then double clicking it. Once you do that, it's going to allow you to move. And you can do that by holding Control and then pressing the left arrow key. Now you can open up the regular tag sign, and you can hold Control and press the right arrow to move to the right side of the word, and you can close it. This way, we immediately created all of the components with just a simple click. And for now, we can comment out the NavBar because it's going to be coming as a component. So if we do that, you can see that we have all of these, but these are actually the components. So if we dive into the hero section and type test, you can see that it changes. So essentially what we've done right now is we've created the entire structure for the entire application. So our job from now on is going to be much, much easier, and we'll be able to focus on what matters, which is writing the JSX code, creating the layout, and then using Tailwind CSS to style it. So let's start from top to bottom, and let's start by creating this great simple navigation bar with a simple logo, and then on desktop version, some links that we see here. We can do that really easily by first of all closing all of the currently open files to have a clean working environment, and then by creating a new folder within the source folder called components. And within components, we can create a new file called nav.jsx, run refce, and we can simply import it within the app.jsx by saying import nav from /components nav. And now we can uncomment it right here, go back, and if we type test, we can see it changes. So now we are ready to start developing the navigation bar. Before we do that, just one thing that's bothering me right now is this favicon and the title in the tab. So we can immediately change that by going to index.html, changing the title, something like Nike. In my case, I'm going to say Nike working version, or working, because we have this deployed one here. And then finally, you want to import the favicon. So we can say right here, href for the icon is favicon.ico. And if we save that, there we go. So let's get started with the first component of the day, which is the navbar. To get started writing our nav, we can first wrap everything into a semantic header tag. This is another pro tip. Always write semantic HTML. Could this have been a div? Yes, of course. But for better accessibility, always use semantic tags such as headers or even navs within them. Now, this header is going to contain a nav, and then a nav is going to contain an h tag that's going to have an href pointing to just /. Within it, we can render an image, and this image is going to have a source equal to, and now we want to target the header logo. This header logo is going to come from import header logo, and we can say from /assets images. And while we're here, we can also import hamburger from assets icons. This is going to be that 3 lines icon that we want to use to indicate that we can open up a mobile menu. Now, going back, we need to ensure that the assets are actually there, because right now it's saying that it's failing to import assets image. And yes, this indeed should have been images. So we can add an S at the end. And then here we're going for icons. And here we simply say icon. So let's rename this to icons, plural, which makes more sense. And we are back in action. Now this image is going to have an alt tag equal to logo and a width of about 130 pixels and a height of 29. So it's a really horizontal logo. Looking great. Now let's start styling the nav around it. Let's give this header a class name equal to padding X, meaning padding on left and right, padding Y of 8, meaning padding on top and bottom, absolute, Z-10, and W-full. So this is going to make it appear on top of the other content, and you can immediately see that because the hero section moved behind it. And again, if you haven't already installed the Tailwind IntelliSense, please do so right now. That's going to allow you to see which CSS styles are being applied once you implement a specific class. And this is a great way to learn Tailwind. Now let's continue styling our nav by giving it a class name, and we want to make it into a flex container with a justify between, as well as items-center and a max container. Now this max container can be a CSS style that we have defined right here. So try not to confuse the additional styles which we have added with the regular Tailwind classes. If you hover over them, you can see what their styles are. Now on the right side, we want to have all of the links to other pages. So we can simply create that below the A tag. We can create a UL or an unordered list and give it a class name equal to flex-1. Flex, meaning it's going to become a flex container. Again, justify center, items-center, gap-16 to provide some spacing between the elements, and max-LG, meaning on min width 1024, we want to hide it, right? To say hidden. So it's only going to be visible on desktop devices. And here we want to display all of these different tags. So of course you could copy them and then create a new link tag for every one of them. But a much better way of doing these types of things is to keep some kind of business logic or links outside of the actual JSX. So let's create a new folder that's going to be called constants. And within the constants, you can create a new index.js file. In that same GitHub just below, from which you copied other styles, you can copy the constants index.js. Here, we're going to have zero logic, so you're not missing anything. But this is just some way in which we can present data in our JSX. So here we have our nav links, which we can simply map over. We also have our different shoes, statistics, and so on. So if you were using a CMS, a content management system, this is all the live data that would be coming from a CMS. Or here, in this case, it's all within this one file. So in case you want to give this website over to your client or an employer, and maybe they're not so technical, they wouldn't know to jump into the nav and then modify the links, but they can go into here and simply add a new link that's going to point to not contact, but something else. It's much simpler when you do it this way. And it's also simpler for us because now we can import it by saying import nav links coming from ... constants. And now what we can do is we can open a new dynamic block of code and say nav links dot map, where we have an item or a link, and we want to immediately return something. It's an immediate return because we used parentheses. And then what do we want to return for each one? It's an LI, a link item, with a key equal to item.label that's going to contain an A tag, an anchor tag inside of it. The anchor tag is going to have an href equal to item.href and a class name equal to font-Montserrat, leading-normal, text-LG for large, and text-slate-gray, which is the color. And within it, we can dynamically render that specific item.label. Now, if we save this and go back, you'll be able to see that we cannot find assets icons from here. So we have to go into the constants and modify this to icons because we renamed our folder, so it makes more sense. Once you do that, you can immediately see that we have the Nike on the left side, as well as all of the other items on the right side. This is looking great. Now, the last part we're missing is this sign in or explore now. And to be fully honest, I don't even think we need it. This is looking great as it is a simple landing page. Of course, I invite you to add more stuff to this. Make it your own. Rename it. Maybe it's not Nike, maybe it's something else. That's the whole point of these videos. The link to the full GitHub repository is also going to be down in the description. If you ever encounter any errors, bugs, or similar, you can simply visit it and refer to the final code. Also, give it a star. But while we're on the topic of making things different, a lot of people recently started tagging me on LinkedIn, and that has proven to be a phenomenal way for you to gain traction and establish yourself as an expert developer. Here, I called it Threads. This guy called it ThreadX, and they essentially recreated our YouTube tutorial, but also added a twist to it. And hey, do that with Nike as well. Turn it into something else. Make it your own. And then people will see how great of a developer you are. Instead of tagging me personally, you can tag JavaScript Mastery on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Threads as well. The more you tag us, the more we're going to share your work and ensure that everybody else sees it as well. With that said, after this UL, the last thing we're missing is going to be a div. And this div is going to render an image that's going to have a source equal to hamburger. And we can say I'll tag hamburger as well as a width of 25 and a height of 25 as well. If we save it, you can see it there. But hey, it shouldn't really be here, right? It should only be on mobile devices once this is not visible. So you know what to do. You can just do a class name. Or wait, no, I'm not going to tell you. Do you know what to do? It's definitely going to include Tailwind, right? So how do we make this little part invisible on devices larger than this specific width? So these items hide right about here. And we need the hamburger to show once they hide. So let's see. Here we're using max LG hidden, which is in about 1024 pixels, display none. But here we want to do the opposite. So we can say usually it's going to be hidden, right? Immediately. But on max LG, we're going to return it to block, which means it's going to be visible. And now we can see the hamburger icon. And if we expand it, we can see the items. Of course, another step for you to do would be to add actual logic to this button so it actually opens up and you can see all of these great list items right within it. For now, we're doing just the representation, so we can proceed to the next section, which we can figure out which one is it by going to app and then diving into the hero section, which is maybe one of the most interesting sections whatsoever because it has this great shoe display where you can actually click on it and change the shoe view. Of course, it's looking much better on larger devices. Let's get started and start developing it right away. To get started with our hero section, we can first wrap everything into an HTML5 semantic section tag. And let's style it a bit. Let's give it an ID equal to home so we can quickly scroll to it by pressing the home button on the navigation bar. And let's start styling it by giving it a class name equal to w-full. This is going to make it take the full width of the screen. And just to be able to see it, let's give it a border -2 and border red 500. That's going to allow us to visually see what we're working on. If we save it, you can just see it here, and we can also give it a padding of 2. There we go. So now you can see the hero section we're working on. Alongside w-full, we can give it a flex property, which is going to make it a flex container. But on extra large devices, we want to make it a flex row. Usually it's going to be flex col, like this, because we want it to appear one below another in mobile devices. We can also give it a justify center, as well as a min-h-screen. So this is a full height of the screen, and you can immediately see how it took 100% of the height of the screen. We can give it a gap-10 for the elements within it, and then a max-container class, which is our own class, which you can quickly check by going to our styles. And there you can see that this simply sets the max width to 1440p. This means that if the content goes beyond it, it's just going to be collapsed and we'll be able to see everything nicely within this viewport. Now let's remove all of these additional styles we added because now we know that the hero section is actually taking the entire height of the screen. Now within it, we can create a div, and this div is going to have a class name equal to relative On extra large devices, it's going to take 2/5 of the screen. So width -2 out of 5. It's going to be a flex container itself and a flex call container with a justify center justification, as well as items-start. This is for vertical orientation, and then W-full for full width, and then max on extra large devices. It's going to have a padding of X and a padding top of 28. So we're just making some space for the content we're going to put inside of it. Now, immediately within it, we can create our small subheading, which is going to just be a p tag. That's going to be this one, our summer collections. Then we have a big one, and then another smaller one, a button, and then these additional letters. So we can immediately start with the p tag by saying our summer collection. Within it, we can create an h1 tag that's going to say the new arrival. And that's actually going to be within the span element. So we can expand this, put it within a span. There we go, and nicely unwrap it. What this is going to allow us to do is to have this within the h1, as well as a break tag and a span element, another one this time. And this one is going to say Nike shoes. Now, I think you can see why we're doing this, because the dark text is different from the Nike text. So we want to leave the shoes outside of it, right here, but the new arrival and Nike are within those spans to which we can provide additional styling. It's going to make sense really soon. And finally, below the H1, we can create a new P tag that's going to just say, discover stylish Nike arrivals, quality, comfort, and innovation for your active life. Feel free to type it out or just put something else there. And you can see how this looks like right now, just plain and simple. And I want us to create a structure first, because then we're going to move over to styling it. Now, below this P tag, we can create a new component, which is going to be called button. So let's go into our components and create a new button.jsx component and run RAFCE. This button is just going to be a simple one. It's just going to be wrapped with a button HTML tag, and it's going to have a list of class names. For starters, we can make it a simple button. We can make it say something like click me, and then maybe sometimes we're going to also have some kind of an icon right here below, which is going to be an image with a specific source. But for now, let's just make it a basic button. Before we start adding class names, we can actually utilize this button right here below our P tag by simply saying button. And we can now import it from /components/button. That's coming right here at the top. In this case, this button is going to have two different props. The first one is going to be a label of shop now. And the second one is going to be the icon URL equal to arrow right. And this is going to be one of our icons that we're going to import right here at the top of the hero section. So let's import the arrow right coming from /assets/icons. And now we're passing all of that there, and you can see click me button there. But instead of click me, we want to actually pass some additional props to it, such as the label and the icon URL. So now immediately, instead of click me, we can render the label, which makes this button a functional reusable component, because now it's going to say show now. No, it's not going to be show, it's going to be shop now, because we're making a Nike landing page. This is good. And then within the image, we can render a self-closing image that's going to have a source equal to icon URL. And I spelled URL all uppercase, so we can use it like this there. The alt tag is going to simply be something like arrow right icon. And a class name is going to be margin left 2 to divide it a bit from the text, rounded -full since it's an icon. And this is a pretty cool new thing that I noticed. Usually rounded full applied a border radius of, if I'm not mistaken, 50%. But it looks like they've made a modification, and now it applies a border radius of 9,999 pixels. I guess this is an optimization from the Tailwind side, but you don't have to worry about the actual style. You just say rounded full and it makes it into a circle. Finally, the width is going to be 5 and the height is going to be 5 as well. And I just noticed that you have the rems here, but also in the comments, they provided the pixel values. So it's pretty cool to see that height of 5 applies a 1.25 rem height, which is exactly 20 pixels. Pretty cool stuff. Now, if we save it, you can see the arrow right here, but this doesn't really look like a button. So let's make it one. In the class name, we can give it a flex, which is going to make the items appear one next to another, justify center to center the items horizontally, and then items-center to center them vertically. We can make it a gap-2 to make some space, and a padding X of 7, a padding Y of 4, a border. We can also give it a font-Montserrat, text-LG, leading-none, so this is going to make the line height of 1. And now we want to choose a background color. Let's say BG-coral-red. And this is coming right within our Tailwind config. Let's also make it rounded-full and text-white. Let's also make the border be in the coral red. And I do believe this is how we want our final button to look like. This is great. Now that we have our button, we can go back to our hero section and we can start creating the layout for these statistics. So to do that, we can go below the button, create a div, which is going to serve as a container for those statistics. So we can give it a class name equal to flex to make it a flex container, justify start, so the elements start at the left side, items-start, so they start at the top, flex-wrap, so in case our screen is smaller, they start collapsing slowly for smaller devices, W-full, so they take 100% of the width, empty of 20, which is margin top of about 5 rem or 80 pixels. And again, I don't know that, but I'm just reading it here from this cool Tailwind extension. And then a gap of 16. Now, if we save this, this is going to push it up a bit. And now we can just map over the statistics. So these statistics can be imported right here at the top by saying import statistics, which are coming from /constants. And now we can map over them by doing .map, where we get each individual stat as well as its corresponding index. And we want to return a div for each one of these. This div is going to render a p tag that's going to render the stat.value. And below it, we want to render another p tag that's going to render the stat.label. So we can unwrap it to make it dynamic. And if we save this, you can immediately see 1K plus brands, 500 plus shops, and 250,000 customers. And this is coming directly from our constants. Again, this is just some basic array of objects containing the value and the label property. You can go here and modify this if you want to. Now it's complaining that our div doesn't have a key, so we can add a key equal to index. Usually not the best practice, but you can also use stat.label as well because it's unique in our case. And then we don't need to have this index. Great. Now we have this representation of the layout, but we are lacking some styling. And if you were using regular CSS, this is the point where you would have to jump into your style sheet, open up the hero on one side, open up the CSS on another, and you would have to start adding classes to each of these elements. Remember, even with typical CSS, you would still need to say class name, and you would have to then think, what meaningful name are you going to give to this summer collection? So maybe you say div above the heading. This is not the ideal name, right? But still, you would have to add some class names. You would have to think what is the proper name to do it. And then you would have to go to your style sheet and add additional styles. But with Tailwind, you just jump right in and you start styling everything. So our summer collection can have a text of XL to make it a bit larger. It can have a font-Montserrat, as well as a text-coral-red. And this is it. We're done with the summer collection. And you can just move down to the h1. The h1 can have a class name equal to mt-10, which is 40 pixels margin on the top to divide it a bit from the summer collection, a font-palanquin, which is a bit different. It's just going to give it that poppy look, and text-8xl. So this is a huge font size, but we need it for our big hero section. We can give it a max-sm, meaning on max small devices, text is going to be a bit smaller, about 72 pixels. You won't see this now, but if you collapse the screen, you can see it's going to become smaller. Also, on smaller devices, we can set the leading, which is the line height, to about, let's do 82 pixels. That's going to give it a bit less height. And then font-bold. But now we want to change the Nike part of this. So the first span is going to have a class name equal to, on extra large devices, it's going to be BG white. Now, why would we want to make it white if the background is white? Well, because on extra large devices, it's going to go above the image. So it should look like this. But on smaller devices, it's just going to be regular white. Then on extra large devices, we can give it white space, no wrap, and we can make it relative with a z index of 10, so it appears above our background, and a padding right of 10 as well. So let's go back to see it. Okay, looking more like it. Now we're dividing this, so the new arrival is going to be on the top, and then we have a break, and then we have another span, which says Nike, and we can give it a class name equal to text-coral-red, inline-block, and margin top of 3. Okay, and finally we have to do something with those shoes. So we can put them right here next to the span, and that's going to give it some space right here. This is already looking so much better, almost like our finished site. So, and of course, if you expand it just a bit more, the new arrival is actually going to go even more nicely right here in one line. There we go. So now let's focus on the statistics, brands, and all that good stuff by styling our P below. We can also give it a class name equal to font-Montserrat. We can give it a text-slate-gray. You do want to have just a bit of color differences, but not too many. Here we have the coral red, the black, and this gray one. We also want to make it bigger by giving it a text-LG, a leading of 8, margin top of 6, and margin bottom of 14. And on small devices, max-W is going to be small. There we go. So now it fits nicely like this. Then we have our button that we talked about. And finally, we have the statistics. So let's style the text within those statistics by giving it a class name equal to text-4XL to make it much bigger, font-palanquin, and font-bold. Okay, this really stands out. And again, we want to have a class name of leading-7, font-Montserrat, and text-slate-gray. There we go. So notice how we used just 2 different fonts right here to make it a bit more interesting, and just 3 different colors. You do want to have a bit of variety, not everything one color, not one font, but don't go over 2 or 3, right? You have to have some visual interest, but still, it all has to make sense as a whole. And now we get maybe to the biggest part of the actual hero section, which is the image that appears below. On large devices, this looks much better because you can see it right here on the right side, and you can even change which color you see right here. So let's focus on the right part of the hero section. For that, we'll have to go all the way out within the section and a bit down. Let's create a new container div for the right side, and immediately we can render an image within it, and that image is going to have a source equal to big shoe image. And this is coming right here from the top, and we can get it if we import big shoe 1 coming from /assets/images. And now we can just go here and render the big shoe 1 and save it. So if we go back, you can see this shoe right here. We can also give it an alt tag equal to shoe collection. We can give it a width of 610 pixels and a height of 500 pixels. And finally, a class name equal to object dash contain, as well as a relative and a z index of 10. And there we go. Now it appears above the text. Of course, we want to style the div that the image is contained within, so we can give it a class name equal to relative, a flex of 1, so it expands nicely, a flex container, justify dash center, items dash center, and this by itself should already nicely center it on the screen and push the text a bit to the left. But now on extra large, we're going to make it a min dash h dash screen. So the min height is going to be 100 pixels on devices with a minimum width of 1280 pixels. On max dash XL, we want to give it some padding Y, meaning on top and bottom of 40. We want to make it a BG primary, which is just going to be white, a BG hero, which is a custom class, a BG cover, and a BG center. This is going to give it this nice image coming right from our styles. Now, if we compare the two, you can see that they're not exactly alike. We have to still provide some padding or spacing right here on the left side. And we can do that by creating a new div below the image. Right now, we're creating a container for these three little images that are going to allow us to change the big image. So before we add any styles to this div, let's first create the content within it. And this is my pro tip for you when using Tailwind or just in general when making websites and layouts. First, put all the representation, meaning the JSX, the HTML, the images, the content, put it in there, and then start styling it and moving it around the website. So first, let's go over the shoes. Where are those shoes coming from? Well, from /constants. So right here at the top, you can import shoes right next to the statistics. Then you can call the .map method on those shoes, where you get each individual shoe as well as its index. And then for each one, you can simply return a div. And this div is going to have a key equal to shoe. And in that case, we don't even need an index. And within that div, we're going to create a new component called shoe card, looking just like this, a self-closing component. Now, of course, this is going to give us an error. So we have to immediately go into the components and create a new shoe card.jsx. This shoe card is going to be an REFCE again. So we have just a basic component, and then we can import it coming from /components/shoe card right here at the top. Going below, we can now provide some additional info to this shoe card. Info such as IMG URL, which is the actual shoe itself that we're mapping over. These are the images. Then we can also provide it the change big shoe image. So this is going to be a setter function, which for now we can leave as an empty callback function. And then we need to provide the actual big shoe image, which is the current image that we're displaying. For now, we can leave this as an empty string. Now, you can see that these shoe cards are not looking best right now. They're just 3 pieces of text. So let's go ahead and let's implement them and turn them into real small shoe cards right here at the bottom. So to do that, we need to go to the shoe card component and accept all of the props we're nicely passing from the hero section. The first one being image URL, then the change big shoe image, and finally the big shoe image itself. Once we accept all of these props, we can simply start creating the representation. The first one is going to be a div that's going to have a class name equal to border-2 rounded-XL. And then we have to figure out if the current image is the currently selected big shoe image, which means that we have to change the styles dynamically to either add or remove the border from the currently selected image. This is a pretty cool thing, so let me show you how to do it. Instead of just a string, you pass a dynamic template string as a class name, looking like this. That then allows you to provide some logic to your class names. So you can say if big shoe image is triple equal to the IMG URL, In that case, of course, if we actually make use of this, we have to wrap it with a $sign and curly braces. And then we can open up a ternary operator and say border dash coral dash red. And usually it's just going to be border dash transparent. Other than that, we can give it some usual styles like cursor dash pointer to make it appear clickable. And then max dash SM flex dash 1. So it's going to be flex 1 on the min width of 640 pixels. And we do want to give it an on click. Of course, this is going to go outside of the class name. And that on click is simply going to call the handle click method. And this handle click is a new function we're going to create right here. Const handle click is equal to an arrow function. And there we can check if big shoe img is not equal to the img URL dot big shoe. In that case, we can change big shoe image by passing the img URL dot big shoe. A lot of shoes right here, but I hope this makes sense. We're essentially just trying to figure out if the currently selected shoe is the one that's showing. If it's not, just change it with the one that we click on. Right now, it's complaining about this big shoe image, saying that it is not defined. So it is supposed to be img and not image right here in the intro, right here in the props, so we can change that here and there. Now, if we save this, still we don't see anything. That's because our div is currently empty. So let's create another wrapper div, and within that div, an image. And that image is going to have a source equal to img URL dot thumbnail. If we save it, immediately you can see 3 more shoes appear right there. But of course, they're no good if they appear there. So let's give them an alt equal to shoe collection. A width of 127 pixels is what I found works best, and a height of 103 pixels. Finally, a class name equal to object contain. But now we have to put them somewhere on the screen by styling the div that wraps them. So let's give it a class name. First, let's make it into a flex container. Give it a justify-center and items-center. If we save it, nothing's gonna change. We can also give it a BG card, which is a special class we created that's going to apply a background, a BG center as well, and a BG cover too. Now we can, on small devices, give them a width of 40. Also, on small devices, a height of 40. Make it rounded-XL, and make it on max small devices, a padding of 4. If we save it, you can see them appear nicely right here. But of course, we're styling each individual shoe right now, which is great because we are in the shoe card. But now going back to the hero, we have to style the div that wraps all of them. So let's give it a flex to make these elements appear in a row. Great. Now on small devices, let's make a gap of 6. And usually a gap of 4 will do. Let's make the position absolute. So this is one of the cases where you have to absolutely position the elements to get them where you want them. Let's make it minus bottom, minus, and then 5% is what I found works really well. This is going to push them down. On small devices, left is going to be 10%. That's going to push them a bit. And on max small devices, PX is going to be 6. Okay, we're getting there. Everything besides this padding on the left side is now looking good. But of course, we have to make this logic work. So once we click on it, we want to be able to change the big image right here to make it a bit more dynamic. So for that, we'll have to create a new useState field. So let's import at the top useState hook coming from React. Then we can define it right here by saying useState, and I'm going to use this state snippet. I'm going to start typing big shoe img and set big shoe img, and then we can pass in the big shoe 1 as the basic currently selected shoe. Now, this isn't going to change anything because the states are not currently being used, but we can actually pass them to our big shoe as the source. So it's no longer going to just render one, it's going to render whichever one is selected. And to make the selection work, we have to modify the callback function right here by giving it a shoe. And then right here, we can say set big shoe img, and then pass the shoe, as well as pass the current big shoe image so we know which one is currently selected. Once we do that and go to the shoe card, now we should be able to see the border. Even though we can select which shoe is currently selected, we don't see that border. So let's see what happened here. We're passing the border -2, we're passing the rounded XL, and then right here, we're opening a new dynamic block of code where we check if the big shoe image is triple equal to the image URL, but we forgot the .big shoe. Because the naming is a bit weird, the URL itself actually is an object containing the big shoe, which is the actual final URL. And with that, we now have the selection, which is looking great, and it actually changes the view right there. Great. With that said, we can now go back to hero section to make some final adjustments. Well, the adjustments we have to make are not in the hero, but rather in our app.jsx, because here we're wrapping our hero with a specific section. So our hero is wrapped with XL padding of 1 I had here, but it's supposed to be L, as in large. So this is going to immediately provide it that padding we've been so desperately looking for. And now we are ready to move to the next section, which is the popular products. So we can close the hero and the shoe card and just leave the app and the popular products open. But before we do that, let's do a final look at how our hero section is looking. On large devices, which is desktop, it's looking flawless. I like how everything is centered in the screen. You can see we have some padding on the left and on the right, and that's because people generally have a narrow field of focus. You cannot focus on the entire width of the screen at once. Some people have large 24, 30, 40-inch screens, and imagine if this page span across the entire ultra-wide screen. That wouldn't be good. That's why we give max width to the pages, which leaves this nice gap of padding on left and right, so everything is still readable. Of course, the NavBar follows, so everything is nicely streamlined. And as we collapse it, we keep this layout for a long time. As you can see here, up to this point, we still have the shoe selection, but on tablet devices and smaller, we just put this on top because that's what matters the most, and then the image selection is actually on the bottom. Another thing you could do, on smaller devices, you could actually completely remove this entire section. That would be okay as well because the hero is what matters the most. But on smaller devices, this is still looking good to me. And with that said, we are ready to proceed to the next section, which is the popular product section. And our popular products are gonna be pretty cool because we already know how to do these little cards. So now we'll be able to just tweak them a bit to make them into a card that contains the rating, the name of the shoe, and the price, and the actual shoe image itself. So let's get started working on our popular products. It's going to be much simpler than the hero section. Trust me. So I'm gonna scroll down. We have our popular products here, and we are ready to get started developing it. To get started with our popular products, we can first import the products themselves from our constants by saying import products from / constants. And let me show you what those are. So these are simply going to be an array of 4 different products with different images, names, and prices. And once again, feel free to change this to whatever you like. Now, inside of here, we can make this a section. This section is going to have an ID, so we can scroll to it, and it's going to be products, and a class name equal to max-container, as well as a max-sm mt-12. So this is a margin top on devices that have a min width of 640 pixels. Within this section, we want to have a div that's going to wrap everything. And that div is going to have a class name equal to flex, flex dash call, so the elements appear one below another, justify dash start, and gap dash 5. This is just a div wrapping those two titles, or a title and a subtitle. So let's create it. Let's create an h2 that's going to say popular products. And below it, we can create a p tag that's going to say something like experience top-notch quality and style with our sought-after selections. Okay, that's great. You can use ChatGPT to generate your titles, or you can just type something out yourself. Now, let's style those two elements by giving this h2 a class name of text-4XL, font-palanquin, and font-bold. Now, this h2 is going to say popular, but the products is going to be in a different color, or rather popular is going to be in a different color. So we can say our, and then popular is going to be within a span element. And this span is going to do just one thing, and that one thing is have a class name of text-coral-red. So if we save this, you can see our popular products and put it in the same line, so it actually has the space. Now let's style the p tag by giving it a class name of, on large devices, max-w-lg, mt of 2 for margin top, font-montserrat, and text-slate-gray. There we go, looking great. And finally, we can start rendering the products below. So we can go below this div tag, still within the section, and create a new div that's going to wrap all of the cards within it. So let's give it a class name equal to margin top of 16 to divide it a bit from the top. This is going to be a grid, large grid-cols-4. So it's going to have 4 columns on large devices. Medium grid-cols-3, small grid-cols-2, and then usually grid-cols-1. So this is pretty cool how you can immediately make it dynamic and make it mobile responsive. On small devices, gap is 6. Usually gap is 14, a bit larger. Now within it, we want to simply map over the products by saying products.map, where we get each individual product. And for each one of them, we want to return a popular product card. We can give it a key equal to product.name, and then we can spread everything else from the product by saying ... product. And of course, we don't yet have access to this card, so let's create it by creating a new component called popular product card.jsx, run refce, and then we have to go back and import it within our popular products, coming from /components/popular product card. And there we go. If you're referencing the final code, you might see something like this. Import popular product card within curly braces from simply /components. This is an alternative approach, but for this to work, you will have to have that index.js file that's going to export all the components like we do have in the sections. So if you're referencing something and if it doesn't work, just ensure that you have that index file in the components as well. Now that we imported it, if we reload the page, we should be able to see 4 different popular product cards. If we change this to A, we can just see 4 letter A's, which means that we are ready to start creating the layout of our actual card containing the image, price, name, rating, and more. So we're passing all of the properties of a popular product. And that actually just includes the img URL, so image URL, the name, and the price. So we can wrap everything in a div, and this div is going to have a class name equal to flex, flex-1, flex-col, w-full, and then max-small, meaning on devices with a minimum width of 640 pixels, w-full. Within it, we can immediately render an image, and this image is going to have a source equal to img URL. Alt is going to be equal to simply the name of that specific shoe. And then class name is going to be width is 280 pixels. This is a specific pixel number, so we have to put it within square brackets, as well as h, or height, is 280 pixels as well. So if you do this, you're going to immediately be able to see these 4 great looking shoe images. But we're not going to stop there. Below the image, we're going to create a div, and this div is going to have a class name equal to mt-8 to divide it a bit from the image, flex, justify-start, and gap-2.5. Now, within it, we're going to have an image, and this is just going to be an image with a source equal to star. The alt tag is going to be rating, and the width is going to be 24, as well as the height. Now, we don't yet have access to the star, and that's because it's an icon coming from import star, which is from data/assets/icons. If we save it, you can see 4 different stars. And next to the star or below it, we can render a p tag that's going to say something like 4.5. Of course, you can make this dynamic later on and have different values for each one of them. This p tag can have a class name equal to font-Montserrat, text-XL, leading-normal, and text-slate-gray. And we can also wrap it in parentheses just to make it appear like we have the star and then the rating is here. Just a little visual touch. Below this div, we can have an h3, which is going to render the name of the shoe. And then below it, we can have a p tag that's going to render the price. So if we save it, okay, it's there, but we can make it look better by giving this h3 a class name of mt2 to divide it a bit, text-2xl to make it larger, leading-normal to provide a 1.5 line height, font-semi-bold, and font-palanquin. There we go. And of course, we can style the price by giving it a class name equal to mt-2, font-semi-bold, font-Montserrat this time, text-coral-red, text-2xl, and leading-normal. Notice how we're playing with the same 2 colors and same 2 fonts to provide this visually interesting look and feel. And believe it or not, with that, we're done with the popular product card as well as the popular products section altogether, because we have our hero and we have our products. And you can even scroll to it by pressing the products right here at the top. So this is looking great. Of course, if you want to improve this application even further, one thing you could do is you can make this clickable, and then you can make them point to a product details page that you yourself will design and develop. So that's a great thing you can do. Post it on LinkedIn and tag JS Mastery so we can share your work. With that said, let's move to the next section, which is the super quality, which sounds pretty interesting, but what it actually is this unique section with an image on the right side and 3 pieces of text on the left side. Again, pretty simple stuff. We have the button designed already. We know how to do this, 2-color title, and we know the styles of these p tags. We're just reusing what we already have. So let's get started. Our super quality is also going to be a section that's going to have an ID equal to about-us, which is going to allow us to scroll to it. We can also give it a class name equal to flex. And while we're doing that, we can move over to our current website to check it out. It's also going to have a justify between because we want to have some space on left and right, and items-center to center it vertically. We also want to do max LG and want to give it a flex-call, which means that on devices that are lower than 1024 pixels, we're going to have a column, and then gap-10 to provide some spacing, W-full, and a max container class name, which is going to ensure everything is contained within our full width. Immediately within it, we can create a second wrapper div. This div is going to have a class name equal to flex, flex-1, and flex-call. And this is a div that is wrapping this text as well as the button. So immediately we can start creating the h2. Within it, we're going to have a p tag as well as a button. And this is all so similar to our initial hero section. So similar, in fact, that I'm going to move to our hero section and copy the p tag, the break, the span, the h1, as well as the button, because we're going to use all of these elements right here within our super quality. So I'm going to simply paste them right here, and we have to import the button coming from ./components/button. And this button is not going to have an icon, so we can simply make it say view details. Great. Now, if we go back here, you're going to notice this is not what we want, surely, right? We can now modify the elements that we copied, starting from the p tag. In this case, the first element is not going to be the p tag, so we can simply remove it, but rather an h2. So we can modify this h1 to say h2. It is going to start with font-palanquin, text 4XL, not 8, not as big as the hero. It's going to have a keyword of capitalize, which is going to make the text capitalized, of course. And we can remove everything else besides font-bold. If we save it, it's already looking more like it, but we can also say on large devices, max-w-lg. So this is going to just limit the max width of the text. Now, within this h2, we can remove the first span and simply make it say, we provide you, and then we can have a span right below it. This span is going to have just one class of text-coral-red, and it's going to say super. Okay, so we provide you super, and then we can duplicate this span element and say quality. Okay. And then after the span, we can say shoes. So if we save this, we provide you super quality shoes, just like on the finished site. And now we can focus on the p tag right below it. So right below the h2, we're going to have a p tag. And this one is not going to have font Montserrat or text grade or stuff like that. It's just going to have a class name of margin top of 4 to divide it from the top. On large devices, max-w-lg, and info text. So this info text is actually a class name that we created that applies all the styles we usually apply to all text elements, like text slate gray, LG, leading 7, and Montserrat. This allows us to more easily reuse it right here. So let's copy this entire piece of text and paste it here, ensuring premium comfort and style. And right below it, we can create another p tag that's going to say, our dedication to detail and excellence ensures your satisfaction. And we can give it a class name of MT6, on large devices, max-w-lg, and also info text. If we save this and go back, you can see this is looking more like it, but this button definitely shouldn't expand the full width. So let's simply wrap it in a div that's going to have a class name equal to margin top of 11 to give it some space and put it within it. If we do that, it's now going to take the full width of this container, which is much smaller. You can also notice, since we're not passing the icon, that the image appears to be broken. So by going into this button, we can only render the image if there is an image. So we can say if icon URL and only then show the image. Otherwise, don't show it, which is now going to look great. View details. Great. So going back, now the entire left side is completely equal to what we have on the right side. And the last thing we have to do is just render the image. So we can go below our div, wrapping the button, and below another div, and create a wrapper div for the image. That div is going to have a class name equal to flex-1, flex, justify, center, and items-center to fully justify it both horizontally and vertically. And within it, we can render a self-closing image tag with a source of shoe8 coming from /assets/images. It's going to have an alt equal to shoe8, a width of 570, and a height of 522, which I found works the best, and a class name of object-contain. Now, if we save this and go back, you're going to notice that this is going to look exactly as it does on the deployed site. So now not only do we have a wonderful looking hero section, we can scroll to our popular products and keep moving down to our super quality section. This is looking great, and we're nailing these sections as we go. Services, special offer, reviews, subscribe, and footer are remaining. So let's continue with the services. We can go back to the app and just control-click to go into the services. The services section is going to be interesting. It's not really a section, it's rather one component that we're repeating 3 times, this specific card. So right within services, we can immediately return a section that's going to have a class name equal to max-container, flex, justify-center to center horizontally, flex-wrap so that the cards wrap if we go on smaller devices, and gap to provide some spacing between the elements. Within it, we want to map over the services. And these services we can import from constants. So import services from /constants. And if you look into it, it's just going to contain, there we go, an array with 3 different objects containing the image URL for the icon, the label, the subtext, and this is more or less it. So now we can simply say services.map. And for each individual service, we can immediately return a self-closing service card self-closing component to which we can pass a key equal to service.label, as well as we can spread the entire service. And of course, now we have to go to components and we have to create the service card.jsx, run RAFCE within it, and finally import it within our services. Once you do that and go to our site, you can see 3 different service cards, which means that now we can go into the service card and we can start making it look better by first of all importing the props for each individual card, such as the image URL, the label, as well as the subtext. Each one of our cards is going to be a div that's going to have a class name equal to flex-1, so it expands if need be. On small devices, the width is going to be 350 pixels. On small devices, the min width is going to be 350 pixels as well. And W is usually going to be full, meaning full width. Rounded is going to be 20 pixels, so the cards are going to be just a bit rounded, and they're going to have a shadow of 3XL, so it appears like they're flowing above the screen. A padding X, meaning on left and right, is going to be 10, which is about 40 pixels, and a padding Y is going to be 16, so this is about 64 pixels. That's going to make it have this specific look. Within this div, we can create a div that's going to wrap our image. So we can immediately render the image that's going to have a source equal to image URL. Alt is going to be a label. A width is going to be 24 pixels and a height is going to be 24 pixels. This should show 3 different icons, but they will only show once we apply class names to the above div that's wrapping it. So we can give it a class name of W-11 for width, H-11 for height, justify-center, items-center, and BG-coral-red, and finally rounded-full. This is going to make these icons come to life. Of course, only if the justify-centered and item-center have flex applied. So right here, we have to make it a flex container for these to work. immediately after, below the div containing the image, we can render an h3 tag. This h3 is going to render the label, and then below it, we can render a new p tag that's going to render the subtext. So if we do this right now and save it, it's going to look good, but it needs some differentiation between the h3 and the p tag. So let's simply apply a class name to our h3 that's going to say mt5 to divide it from the icon, font-palanquin, text-3xl to make it larger, leading-normal, and font-bold. Finally, for the class name for our p tag, we can do mt3 to divide it from the top, break-words. This is an interesting one. It's going to apply the overflow wrap of break words. So it's only going to break on a specific word, not on a specific letter. Font is going to be Montserrat. Text is going to be LG or large. Leading is going to be normal. And then again, we have the text slate gray right here. So there we go. We have our 3 cards, which are identical to the cards that we have right here. Now we can move over to the special offer containing 2 buttons and some images. Again, I hope you can notice that this special offer is almost exactly the same as this one right here. So we can just copy the part from this section. And we can do that by going all the way back to super quality and just copy the div that has these h2s, p tags, and buttons within it. So if you copy it, go back to the app, and move into the special offer, we can get started with creating this great part. So immediately, we can just wrap everything in a section, and that section is going to have a class name equal to flex justify-wrap items-center. So we're really centering everything. On Max-XL devices, we want to give it a flex-col-reverse. That means that it's going to be flex column, but the elements are going to appear in a reverse order on mobile devices. And then a gap of 10, as well as a max container. Now, within this section, we definitely want to show this image containing the 30% off. And here's what I said. On extra large devices, this is going to show right here on the left side. But as soon as we go deeper, it's going to behave the other way around. So if we go smaller, you can see that the special offer is going to appear on top. Hence, we have the flex col reverse. But still, we have to define it so that this is the number 1 here. So we're going to immediately create a div that's going to have a class name equal to flex-1. And then within that div, we can render that self-closing image tag. It's going to have a source equal to offer. And that's coming from data/assets/images. It's also going to have a width of 773 pixels and a height of 687 pixels. I found these values to work the best. And a class name equal to object-contain, as well as w-full. So now if we save this, and again, make sure that you imported this actual offer image, you should be able to see a huge image right here. And right below this div containing the image, we can paste the div that we previously copied from this section right here. So simply paste it there. And don't forget to import the self-closing button component. If we now save this, oh my God, this is already looking really close to the final product. We just have to change some wording right here. So instead of saying we provide super quality shoes, we can say something like, right here within the span, that's going to be special. We can remove this text before, and then here we can say offer outside. So special offer, and no shoes right here. And we can make it fit right here to look good. Then we have a p tag, and here we can copy these 2 elements. So the first p tag and the second p tag. There we go. And we can make it all look nice and tidy. And finally, instead of one, we have two buttons right here on the finished website. So instead of view details, we need a shop now and learn more. So let's make this div containing the button a flex container, give it a flex wrap, and a gap of 4. Here we have the shop now button, and this is going to be a regular one that's going to have also the icon URL. So icon URL, and it's going to contain the arrow right coming from /assets/icons. But now below it, we want to have another button, and this button is going to have a label of learn more. We're going to pass it also a background color equal to BG white, a border color equal to border slate gray, and finally a text color equal to text-slate-gray. Now we can dive into that button and accept all of these new props that we're now passing into it. These are going to be background color, text color, as well as a border color. And now we can make use of them right within this button component. So first of all, here, we're going to make this class name dynamic. So we're going to wrap it and make it into a template string. So here we can wrap this, and what we have is now the ability to apply some additional class names depending on specific conditions. So after leaving none, we can leave some space right here and open up a new dynamic block of code where we look into the background color. If we have it, then we apply a class name of background color as well as text color and a border color. But if we don't have the background color, then we do the regular BG coral red, text white, and border coral red. And we end up with something that looks like this. Of course, after we nicely space it out, there we go. And we don't need a closing square bracket. I hope this makes sense. So we check for the background color. If we have it, that must mean we have the text color and the border color as well. We make them dynamic, else we make it just a regular one. And now here we need to ensure we're closing everything properly. So let me check that right now. I do believe that we need to close this curly brace right here. And we can do that right after the background coral red. Of course, we can bring the rounded full outside right here. And right now we're full of errors, but essentially what you should have is a button that looks like this, where you have a dynamic class name where you check for the background color. If you have it, you apply those colors, else you apply regular ones. So in this case, we have our super quality where we have a regular button, which we can see here. But then we also have a learn more button with a background color of BG white, border color, and text color. So it should also show right here, considering we made those changes. But as you can see on our current site, the button is not there as it is on this site right here. And the reason why it's not appearing is because I was creating it within the super quality. So now it's here instead of here. So I can just copy it, close this page right here, go to our trusted app.jsx, move into the special offer, and just paste it right here below view details. Of course, we also have to move the styles from the div that's wrapping it, which are going to be these ones right here. Flex, flex wrap, and gap 4. We can remove that from here and move it over to special offer div after the MT11. So if we do that, you can see that now we have our great special offer. And with that, we're back to the app where the next section is customer reviews. But regarding everything that we have right now, it is looking perfect. All the way from the homepage to popular products, our super quality 3 services card, and a special offer, it's looking great. One thing that I can see could be added are some cool animations right here. So maybe once you refresh, the upcoming sections can slowly roll in, or maybe even animate on hover or something like that. Another cool thing for you to add. But with that said, let's move to the next section of the day, which is customer reviews. So I can collapse this right here, and we can get started. Our customer reviews are not going to be much different than what we're used to doing with our other sections and components. It's going to be a section, and of course later on we're going to import some kind of components into it. But I think you can get the point of where we're going with this. First doing the layout, separating everything into components, and then adding additional styling using Tailwind. At all times ensuring that we reuse our classes, we reuse some of the components, and just keep the code clean by importing everything at the top and not defining it within the sections themselves. The point of this videos is not for you just to watch them and replicate what we're doing. If at any point or right now so far in this video something wasn't 100% clear to you, my goal is not for you to just replicate this. It's for you to actually learn it. So if you have any questions, just go down in the comment section and ask me. The goal of this is for you to actually learn how to create simple landing pages and how to utilize the full powers of Tailwind. So with that said, let's start implementing our customer reviews. We're going to have a simple section that's going to have a class name equal to max-container. Right within it, we're going to have an h3, and that h3 is going to say what are, then we're going to have a span element within it. So what are, a span that's going to say customers, and then finally we're going to have a new line, say, something like this. And all of this is within the h3. Now we can save this, and immediately you can see it right here. Let's also give it a class name equal to font-palanquin, text-center, text-4XL, and font-bold. And at this point, I think you can also start noticing how much specific class names are getting repeated. By now, you definitely know how to set up a specific font, center the text, change the boldness of the text, as well as its size. Writing Tailwind classes is like speaking a language. There are studies that show that in English language, the most common 2,000 words make up for 90% of our conversations. So that means that if you learn how to use the most common classes, you're going to know how to do the majority of stuff. And for the last 10%, you can always look up the dictionary, or in this case, Tailwind CSS docs. So with that said, let's apply a class to our span, which is going to be text coral red. There we go. And we also have to provide some spacing within the span element. So it looks like this. Now below the h3, we can also have a p tag. And there we can say something like, here genuine stories from our satisfied customers. There we go. And of course, we need to style it by giving it a class name equal to info-text, margin auto, margin top 4, max-w-lg, and text-center. And now we can create a div right below this p tag. That div can have a class name equal to margin top 24, flex, flex-1, justify-evenly. This is a good one, not used so often, but a quick Google search of justify evenly will show you what it is for. So if you look at the justify content, specifically in Tailwind docs, and search for evenly, it's going to apply space evenly. And if we search for it, you can see that it's going to even out all the spacing so that there is the equal amount of space around each item. Pretty cool. We can also do item center to center vertically. On max LG, we're going to turn it to flex col and gap-14 between the elements. Now here, we can map over the reviews. So we can import reviews from /constants and then say .map, where we get each individual review. And for each one, we're going to return a review card component, which is going to look like this, a self-closing new component that we are about to create. So there we go. It's this one right here, and we can create it within the components folder, review card.jsx, and we can run RAFCE inside of it, and we can import it right here. Import review card coming from data/components/review card. And now we can pass some additional props to it. In this case, we'll have to pass the key, which is going to be equal to review dot, and we can do something like customer name, because that's going to be unique for sure. We can do the img URL equal to review.img URL. Customer name is equal to review.customer name. Rating is equal to review.rating, and feedback is equal to review.feedback. And with that, we have everything we need to dive into the review card, accept those props, and get started with creating a layout that's going to look like this. Now, there's a question I want to ask you when it comes to you watching these videos and getting value from them. As I said, it's one thing to just simply flow through them and rebuild what I build, but how are you finding this educational material? Do I speak too loud? Am I usually a bit too excited to convey the data? Or would you prefer the way I'm speaking right now, kind of a more laid back approach where it's really like I'm talking to you as a friend? That could be potentially something that you prefer more over the excited approach, or maybe not. Let me know. And just let me know, should I slow down? Should I speed it up? Whatever you think, any feedback is appreciated. So just say, here's the recommendation, and then type it out in the comments. Whatever your thoughts are on how I can help you in a better way, just let me know, okay? With that said, let's get all of those props at the top, such as the image URL, customer name, rating, and feedback. And we can start writing this out by giving this div a class name equal to flex, justify dash center to center items horizontally, items dash center to center them vertically, and flex dash call to make them appear one below another. There we can have a self-closing image tag that's going to simply render the source img URL, which in this case is the URL of the customer. So we can render the customer right here with a class name of rounded-full, because that's how we usually show avatars. It can also have the object cover, as well as W-120 pixels and height-120 pixels as well. If we save this, you can see these two great-looking people right there. And let's hear out what they have to say about Nike. So there we can render their feedback. Okay, this is looking pretty good. Then we can, below the feedback, show a div. And within that div, we can render a self-closing image that's going to contain a source equal to star. And this star is coming from dot/assets/icons. There you can change the width as well as the height of that star to 24 and give it a class name of object-contain and m-0 for 0 margin. Finally, below the image, still within the div, you can render a p tag that's going to simply render a rating within parentheses. So it's going to look something like this. And of course, we need to know who these people are. So below this div, you can render an h3, rendering the customer name. Great. So we have Morik and Loda, and now we can position these reviews a bit better so they make more visual sense. So we can start by providing a class name to the feedback element, and it can have a margin top of 6, a max-w small, text-center, and info-text. Of course, I am missing an O right here. Okay, this is already looking so much better. Now we can style this div that's going to be used for rating by giving it a margin top of 3, flex so that the rating appears in a row, justify-center, items-center, and a bit of a gap of 2.5. Finally, we can style the p tag by giving it a class name of text-xl, font-montserrat, as well as text slate gray right here. Okay, that's looking better. And finally, the h3 for the name by giving it a class name equal to mt1, font-palanquin, text-3xl to make it much bigger, text-center, and font-bold. There we go. This is looking exactly like it does on the deployed website. And with that, we're done with the review card. And the review part was the last part of our customer reviews, which means that now if we expand it, this is looking great. Of course, if you want to, you can provide an additional review and it's going to still nicely fit on the screen. With that said, we can move to the subscribe section, which is going to allow people to sign up for updates and newsletter from Nike to receive some great news. So let's do that right away by moving into the subscribe section. And doing the subscribe section is going to be one of the easiest parts of our app, as you already know how it all goes. So we can simply create a new section right here and give it a class name equal to max-container, flex, justify-between, items-center, on max-lg, we can give it a flex-call so it appears on mobile devices, and then gap-10. We can also give it an ID equal to contact us. So this is going to move us down this section. And we can start with an H3 that's going to say something like sign up for. And then again, we're going to have that span. And then within the span, we can have updates. And we can also say and newsletter right here. So if we save this and go back, you can start seeing the outline of what we're about to achieve. So let's give it a class name equal to text-4xl. Leading dash 68 pixels is what I found looks closest to the design. LG on large devices, max-WMD, font-palanquin, and font-bold. Finally, for the span, we want to give it a class name of text-coral-red. And this is looking better. Of course, after we provide some spacing, so I can make this span in a single line and just give it some spaces before and after. Now, below this, we want to render a div. And within that div, we're going to have an input. This is going to be a self-closing input of a type is equal to text, with a placeholder equal to subscribe@nike.com and a class name equal to input. There we go. Finally, below the input, we can have a div, and within the div, we can have a button component. It's going to be a self-closing button, which we have to import from components/button with a label equal to sign up. And we're going to also give it some new property, which is called full width. So if we go into the button, here we have w-full, but what we can do is we can only show that if our button actually is full width. So at the top, we can get the full width property from props. And then here we can say if full width and only then do the full width like so. And we have to close it here. So for now, it doesn't appear it's full width, but soon enough, you'll see as soon as we give additional class names to this div, it's going to extend to the full size of the div itself. So if we give it a class name of flex, on max SM, justify-end, items-center, and most importantly, max-SM, w-full. So it's going to take the full width of the screen. Now, this div is within this div right here. So we also have to provide a class name to the div above. And let's give it an LG max-W of 40%. So on large devices, they're going to take 40% of the width of the screen. Usually W-full. So here you can immediately see that it jumped below. Now let's also give it a flex, items-center, max-SM, flex-call. So on mobile devices, it's going to be in a column. Usually it's going to be in a row. Gap-5, padding-2.5. On small devices, we also want to give it a border And also on small devices, the border is going to be slate gray and it's going to be rounded. So here we have that actual input field. And if you compare it, it's not quite there. We're missing the rounded full. So rounded dash full. And there we go. So now it's looking much closer to what we have on this side right here. As a matter of fact, this completes our current section, which means that we only have the footer that's ready to go. This footer contains a lot of stuff. Nike is a big company and they have a lot of things to showcase, such as their products, help, get in touch, terms and conditions and the copyright, as well as some information about the company. This is great for interlinking within the pages and in general good for SEO. So now we can go out of the subscribe and move into the footer section. The footer is going to start as a footer, HTML5 semantic footer tab. And within it, we can render a div that's going to wrap some of the content within it. The footer itself is going to have a class name equal to max-container. We can save it and already check it out right here. It's pretty empty, so there's not a lot to see. But this div within it is going to have a class name equal to flex, justify-between, items-start, gap-20 to provide some spacing, flex-wrap, and on max large devices, we're going to also do flex-call. So on devices that are larger than minimum width of 1024 pixels, it's going to be column instead of a row. Within it, we can render a div that's going to contain the link to the start of the page or this logo that's going to say Nike. So there we can give it a class name equal to flex, flex-call, and items-start. Within it, we can render an anchor tag that's going to simply have an href of /, meaning home. And there we can render a self-closing image tag that's going to render the footer logo coming from /assets/images. That's going to look something like this. It can have a width equal to 150 and a height equal to 46, just to make it a bit smaller. And we can also put it side by side by the editor so we can see the changes live. Now within this image, below the anchor tag, we can have a p tag that's going to say something like get shoes ready for the new term at your nearest Nike store. So we can simply copy that text from the deployed site and give it a class name equal to, right now you cannot even see it because it's dark, MT6 for margin top, text-base, leading-7, font-Montserrat, text-white-400, and on small devices, max-w-sm, which is going to make it appear just like so, because it's going to decrease the width that the text can go over. Finally, we want to map over many of our new social media icons. So just below the p tag, we can create another div that's going to have a class name equal to flex, items-center, gap-5, and margin 8, or margin top of 8. And there we want to map over social media coming from /constants. So .map, and then we can render over each individual icon that belongs to a specific social media platform. For each one, we can return a div, and within the div, we can render an image that's going to have a source equal to icon.source, src, alt equal to icon.alt, and a width of 24 as well as a height of 24. If we save it, you cannot see them yet because they're dark, so we have to style the div that's wrapping it. And we can do that by adding a class name to this div of flex, justify-center, items-center to really center that icon both vertically and horizontally, W of 12 pixels, as well as a height of 12. And this is not 12 pixels, it's H12, which is a Tailwind measure, so actually it's going to be 3 rem or 48 pixels for that matter, and a BG white, as well as a rounded dash full. So it's going to create these three nice 50 pixel circles. Now below these two div, we want to create a new section. And this is going to be a section for our products, help, and get in touch. So what we can do there is we can create a new div that's going to have a class name equal to flex, flex-1, justify dash between this time. On large devices, a gap of 10 and usually a gap of 20, and then a flex wrap in case we don't have too much screen width. Now inside of here, we want to map over footer links coming from / constants. So we can say dot map, and for each section, we want to create a new div that's going to have a key equal to section. So let's see how do our footer links look like. We have three sections: products, help, and get in touch. And it's the similar case right here. If you look into the footer links belonging to our constants, you can see that this is an array of three objects where we have a title of that section and then an array of links within the section itself. So we can create a section, and then we can create an h4 element within that section with a section.title. We can immediately give it a class name equal to text-white so we can see it right here. Below the h4, we want to create a UL, an unordered list, and there we want to say section.links.map, where we have each individual link, and then for each one, we want to render an LI, a list item. And within the LI, we want to have an anchor tag that's going to render the link.name. So if we save this, you can see all the links, but of course we are yet to style them. So let's style the h4 first to make it a bit bigger. Alongside text white, it's going to have a font-Montserrat. It's going to have a text to Excel that's going to look like so. And I can move this cursor right there so you can see it. Leading dash normal, as well as a font dash medium, and margin bottom of 6. So now we have these sections, and now we need to style each individual list item by giving it a class name of margin top 3, text dash white dash 400, font dash Montserrat, text dash base, leading dash normal, and if you want to be super playful, you can give it an on hover color of text slate gray. Now, if you save this, you can see that now you have these, and you can also make them cursor pointer. That means that they are going to be clickable. There we go. This is looking much better, and each LI has to have a key, so we can give it a key right here, equal to link.name. There we go. Finally, we need to do the last section to complete this footer, which is the copyright section. So we're going to go one more time below these three braces, and then below two more divs right where the ending footer tag is. And we're going to create one final wrapping div. This div is going to have a class name equal to flex, justify dash between, because we're going to have elements appear on two different sides, and then text dash white dash 400, margin top of 24. On max small devices, meaning min width of 640, we want to have it as flex dash call. So this is going to be on mobile devices. And on max dash small devices, also items center. So if we go all the way really small, we need them to show one on top of another in the middle. There we go. So going back, we can now actually start adding things within it. And the first thing we're going to add is going to be another div. And this div is going to have the copyright image sign within it. So let's have a class name equal to flex, flex-1, justify start, items center, and gap 2, as well as font Montserrat and cursor pointer in case somebody wants to read our copyright. And we can here render a self-closing image with a source equal to copyright, which can be imported from /assets icons, with an alt tag equal to copyright, a width of 20, and a height of 20 as well. And it needs to be rounded. So a class name of rounded-full can go well with the margin 0. So now we can see this copyright signed. And right below it, we can render a p tag that's going to say copyright, all rights reserved. There we go. And finally, below this div, we can have one final p tag that's going to say terms and conditions. And we can give it a class name equal to font-montserrat and cursor-pointer. And there we go. This completes our footer. And with our footer complete, I believe we can now go back to our public folder, or rather our index.html, and at least I can remove the working part out of it because we're no longer working on the website. We have successfully completed the last section here. So we can now proudly expand this to its full glory. We can see the nice footer and slowly scroll to the top. Through the newsletter sign-up form, 2 testimonials, as well as this great special offer tab, services, quality, super quality, and then we have some additional popular products, and finally an interactive hero section where you can change some shoes right here. All of this is looking great, and of course, it is completely mobile responsive. So even on the smallest of devices, it is looking great, and it almost feels like a native mobile application. We also don't have a lot of animations here, so it's going to be super optimized and it's going to load incredibly quickly. Of course, I want to leave some stuff up to you to add some animations, maybe even a product detail sections. If you do add those things and modify the design a bit, maybe make it not Nike, but some other company, tag me on LinkedIn at JavaScript Mastery, and we're going to gladly reshare it. But with that said, we're now moving on to the last part of every single JSM video, which is the deployment process. You can be proud of building this out, and now we are ready to deploy it to Hostinger's incredibly fast servers with a custom free domain. So let's get started. To deploy our project, you can open up the terminal, stop it from running by pressing Ctrl+C, clear it, and then run npm run build. This is going to create an optimized production build of our React application and allow us to upload it to Hostinger's fast server. In just 1.94 seconds, the build is created. So you can go to File, and right here you'll see a new dist folder, which you can right-click and then click Reveal in File Explorer or Find in Finder if you're on Mac. Once you open it up, you'll see that you have assets, favicon, and the index, which means that we are ready to go back to Hostinger. Open up the control panel that we created at the start, and if you haven't done that already, go back to the start of the video and choose a new domain and connect it with a specific hosting. Then go to File Manager. It's nice that they provided this new Do Not Upload Here document. You need to move within the public HTML, remove the default PHP, and then simply drag and drop all the files right here. It's going to upload them within less than a couple of seconds, which means that you can close this and just open up the domain. And just like that, within less than a minute, the website you've been working so hard to develop is now online on the internet. And it is HTTPS secured, which is great. The domain is right here. You can share it with your friends, and it is super fast to load. Let's not forget that it is also 100% mobile responsive. So now you know. You know how to use Tailwind to create beautiful looking applications. You know all of the best practices, and we went together through the process of developing one such application. All of this has been incredibly educational, for me at least, and I hope you share that opinion with me. With that said, it was a true pleasure having you watch this entire video, and since you're still here, it means you're the perfect candidate to expand your learning so much more through additional project-based coaching. Really soon, we're releasing a new Next.js 13 course, which you'll be able to see here if it has been released. And on top of that, we also have our flagship masterclass experience, which allows you to get employed as a professional developer within 6 months of graduating. So if that sounds interesting, and if you're not a beginner, definitely look into it. With that said, one more time, thank you so much for watching. You are great, and have a wonderful day.